I was just standing there, watching her destroy what I had worked so hard for. 6:47 a.m. I step out of my front door, and there she is, Brenda Clearwater, our HOA president, crouched like a criminal, slashing my bright orange path markers to shreds with a box cutter. I couldn't believe my eyes. She stood up, brushed off her designer jeans, and laughed like she just won some kind of twisted trophy. I'm Miles, a disabled combat vet, and those markers weren't just decorative. They were essential. Those markers were part of a federal court order after an IED explosion in Afghanistan took my mobility. My left leg doesn't always work, and the court ruled that I needed these markers to guide me safely along the walkway. This wasn't a request. It was a court order. But Brenda didn't care. She laughed as she stomped on them, vandalizing the very thing that keeps me safe, all while her expensive Range Rover blocked my driveway. I couldn't believe it. What Brenda didn't know, tampering with a federal court order isn't just a slap on the wrist. It's a serious federal violation. What would you do if someone destroyed the aids you depend on while mocking you for it? Well, Brenda was about to find out what happens when you cross the line. 18 months ago, Carmen and I thought we found our slice of suburban paradise here in Desert Winds Estates, Phoenix. It was the quiet we'd been looking for. Our daughter, Zoe, loved the community pool. Carmen, a trauma nurse, found peace after grueling 12-hour shifts dealing with gunshot victims. Me, after an IED blast in Afghanistan left me with hearing loss and mobility issues, I just wanted to rebuild my life and my freelance IT consulting business. Desert Winds seemed perfect. 847 homes, built between 2018 and 2020. It was mostly families and retirees. The sound of sprinklers clicking, the smell of chlorine from backyard pools, kids laughing. It felt like peace, like healing after years of war. But then we met Brenda Clearwater, the HOA president. She treated the neighborhood like her own dictatorship. A retired pharmaceutical sales manager, 52 years old, she drove a white Range Rover with a vanity plate HOA boss, and she wasn't joking. She measured grass with a ruler, slapped violation notices for Christmas lights past January 2nd, and had a problem with every little thing. Anything that didn't match her idea of perfection was grounds for a fine. Her cronies, Dale Pinkerton and Judy Whitmore, helped enforce her vision. Dale, an accountant, was obsessed with finding ways to squeeze money out of residents. Judy ran the gossip mill like a CIA operation. Together, they transformed Desert Winds into their own little kingdom, and they were about to make my life hell. It all started 6 months after we moved in. My left leg, courtesy of shrapnel and multiple surgeries, didn't work the way I needed it to. Some days, I'm fine, but other days it's like walking through quicksand. So, I did what anyone would do. I applied for reasonable accommodations under the ADA. Simple things like brighter pathway lighting, non-slip surface markers, and reflective strips to guide me when I lose my balance. It wasn't anything fancy, and I'd fund the whole thing myself. But Brenda? She said, absolutely not. She told me my accommodations would ruin the aesthetic of Desert Winds. The HOA didn't have to accommodate me, in her eyes. So we went to battle. Under the Fair Housing Act, HOAs can't deny reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities, no matter how it affects the neighborhood's aesthetic. And Brenda, as usual, didn't care. It didn't end there. After months of legal back and forth, Brenda took it to the next level. The harassment came in the form of fines. Fines for things like Carmen's car being slightly over the line, trash cans being visible for too long, even Zoe's wind chimes. Each violation notice was a calculated move to make us miserable enough to leave. But I wasn't going anywhere. Then, 2 weeks after I won in federal court, Brenda made a move that would turn this whole fight into something personal. She called an emergency HOA meeting where she tried to convince the entire neighborhood that my pathway markers were a threat to property values. But she didn't know what was coming. I've been documenting everything. Arizona's one-party consent law meant every phone call, every interaction was being recorded. All of it was evidence. And Brenda had no idea that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. When she tried to rally the community, I made my move. I reached out to the FBI and built my case. Brenda, in her arrogance, thought I was just some guy she could push around. But I wasn't alone in this fight. Tom Rodriguez, a retired teacher, and a few other neighbors came forward, supporting me and saying what Brenda was doing wasn't right. More and more people saw through her. Then Carmen uncovered something that would change everything. Brenda had been embezzling money from the HOA. She'd been funneling HOA funds into her own pocket through fake landscaping contracts. And Carmen had the proof. Brenda had been stealing from every single homeowner in Desert Winds. The real story was never the markers, it was the money. And Brenda had made the mistake of letting her greed expose her. The stage was set. Friday's annual HOA meeting was about to become the most explosive in Desert Winds history. Brenda, thinking she could rally the community against me, had no idea I was about to drop the bombshell. It started with Tom Rodriguez, who stood up and asked about the landscaping contracts. Then Mrs. Smith, an elderly neighbor, asked why we were paying so much for services we never received. And then, in walked Judge Patricia Hernandez, the federal judge who issued the order for my accommodations. That's when Brenda's panic set in. She had no idea what was coming. I stood up, and with the camera rolling, I called her out for what she really was, a thief, using my disability as a cover for her crimes. The crowd went silent as I laid out the facts. How Brenda had been embezzling money, how Dale Pinkerton was helping her, and how she tried to bribe me with $50,000 to leave. And then, Agent Walsh's voice crackled through the room speaker. The FBI was there. Brenda's empire crumbled in front of everyone. The residents, who had once been afraid of Brenda, now saw her for what she was. The truth was out. By the end of the meeting, Brenda had been arrested. Federal charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and civil rights violations. It was the sweetest victory I've ever had. But the real victory? We'd turned the tables. The neighborhood had rallied, and the fight for justice wasn't just about me. It was about standing up for what's right, no matter who tries to tear you down. And here's the real kicker, the lesson that I learned. Sometimes when people try to crush you, they end up exposing themselves. Brenda thought she could hide behind her power, her position, and her lies. But in the end, the truth came out, and it wasn't just my victory. It was a victory for every person who's ever been bullied, ignored, or dismissed. So what would you have done? How far would you go to protect yourself, your family, and your rights? Do you think Brenda got what she deserved? Let me know what you think. Share your story, and let's talk about the power of standing up when the odds are stacked against you.